Friday, Bill, who stands right here, I think he gave his testimony at the main campus. So these guys are everywhere all the time serving. It's not just here, it's everywhere. These guys are true servants. Let's hear it for these guys again. Truly amazing. You know, these guys inspire me so much because they don't question anything. They just serve humbly. And that's what God calls us to do, to serve humbly. There's so much need in the world. And he doesn't need somebody to come in with all these big ideas and try to change things all the time. All he wants and all he asks is humble servants. That's it. He just wants us to show up. God will do the rest, and oftentimes he'll work through us to do amazing things we never even thought. And I've heard these guys for many, many years play, and I can't tell you how inspired I am from this music. So thank you guys. Thank you, Men of War, for your service to this ministry. Absolutely amazing. And I don't even think they realize the last two songs they played go right hand in hand with this message as we're talking about. They talked about press on, right? Press on. What do you do when you fail? You press on, right? In the eye of the storm. I can't tell you how many times my failure has caused me to go inside a storm in my own head. And it's a struggle. You know, it's amazing that those two songs. I love the words of those two songs because it really is words that we need to hear. And I hope that with this particular message today, as we talk about what Jesus does with our failures, I hope you guys can get something out of it because we want you guys to walk away encouraged and with hope. That regardless of how many times you failed, who you failed with, how often you failed, maybe you just failed recently today, I don't know. But regardless of all the details of your failures, I want you to walk away here with hope that only comes from Jesus Christ. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
Amen. So last week, if you guys were here, last week we dissected failure. We looked at Peter in particular, 3 ways in which he failed and what caused him to fail. And the first one was he overestimated his strengths. He got cocky. And then he really cared about what others thought of him, which is why he denied Jesus 3 times. People were looking at him, hey, were you with that man? And he denied Jesus 3 times, even though he said he wouldn't, and he did. And then he spoke without thinking. He actually was cursing, I think, on the third denial of Jesus.
Sure
so he wasn't thinking. He was just speaking without thinking. And we often do that, which is what causes us to fail. And so last week we looked at 4 of the things that we can do when we fail. But the last one in particular of last week, which is casting our failures on Jesus, that's what we're going to look at here today. It's less on ourselves on how to overcome failure. It's less on, okay, how can I convince myself to bounce back from this failure? That's not what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about what God, what Jesus Christ can do with your failure. This is revolutionary. This isn't something you hear in self-help books. This isn't something you don't find on Google, all these quotes on failure. This is something totally different. This is something that Jesus himself can do with our failures and how he can use them to do incredible, miraculous things that we never, ever thought possible. That's the message we're going to be talking about today. So if you pull out your message notes, we're going to look at, this message says, what does Jesus do with our failures? To kick this off, we're going to look at Luke 22, verses 31 and 32. It says, Simon, Simon. And if you know Simon, Simon was Peter. Jesus named him Peter because that meant rock. Now there's Petros, which is big rock, and there's Petros, which is small rock. Both are Greek words. But Jesus is referring to him as the big rock, and we're going to get into that a little bit later. But it says, Simon, Simon, Satan asked to sift you like wheat, meaning he wants to get at him. He wants to attack him. He's going to attack him every day because Satan knows he's a threat and he knows what he's going to do. And if any of you know, the Pentecost, Peter himself gave a miraculous sermon that converted 3,000 people at Pentecost to Jesus Christ. So this was 50 days after he denied Jesus. He knew that he was going to be a threat. So Satan's going to come at him. So he says, Satan, I asked to sift you like wheat. Satan wants to mess with you, just like he messed with Peter. But it says, but I prayed for you, that your faith should not fail. So when you have repented and turned me back again, strengthen and build up your brothers. That in a nutshell has a lot of meat in there. And we're going to dissect that verse so you guys can understand what that means and how you can apply that into your life. But before we do that, I wanted to stop. And I want us to break up into groups and really resonate on 2 questions, okay? The first question, Nick is going to lead this side of the group, which is, what is it, Nick?
How has failure negatively affected your life?
How has failure negatively affected your life? So Nick, you're going to take this group all to your right, and you're going to answer that question together. So I'm curious to see what you guys will come up with. And Sue, where's Sue at?
I got travel.
Right here.
Oh, there you are. Okay, so you're going to take on this group over here. So everything on the right here. And what is your question, Sue? What do you got on there?
What are some ways God can use your failures for good?
What are some ways God can use your failures for good? So I want you to take this group, circle up, and talk to her and answer those questions, all right? We'll take about 5 minutes and we'll come back.
Service.
Talk amongst yourselves.
Give me Nick. Service.
Service?
Service. Yeah.
Okay. What do you mean specifically?
Use word back.
Sorry, what?
Service. That's what he wants to do. Corinthians love.
Okay. Yeah, but the question was, how has failure negatively affected your life? Negatively affected your life.
Shock is not shock. So what are some ways God can use
When I
failures for
didn't
good?
all the word.
Ways that you
Okay.
can do it.
And I slipped or had a slip. Anybody?
Okay, prayer. Good.
Pretty good.
It would be a good word for that. Day. One thing.
All right, so I've got a few things already written down for how has failure negatively affected your life. First and maybe most important is temporarily. In other words, failure affects your life for a few minutes. Success affects